In this episode of Teaching Orchestra, we're going to be talking about when things go wrong. And trust me, things are going to go wrong. And there are some good ways that you can react to bad situations, and there are some not so good ways that you can react. The whole theme of this should be to just stay calm, take a step back, and don't be so reactive when bad things go wrong. So the first segment we're going to talk about is angry parents. If you don't have at least one angry parent, you're probably not doing your job right. If you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. So you should be taking risks, you should be doing things, and probably somebody's going to get upset with something that you do. Otherwise, you're going to have kind of a pretty bland program. Now, think about it. Do you want everybody to agree with you all the time? You know, that might seem like a good short-term strategy, but if everybody agrees with you all the time, then how are you going to grow? If nobody's challenging you and you're not seeing things from a different perspective, then how are you going to make changes to make your program better? So when you have parents that are upset, it's good to listen to them and be empathetic. And sometimes you'll learn something from them. You don't necessarily have to change everything all the time just because a parent disagrees with you, but it's important to get their perspective and maybe come up with a compromise or make a tweak here that's beneficial for the program as a whole. A lot of my best booster club presidents and I didn't really see eye to eye at first on a lot of things. And probably some of them took the job as the booster club president so that they could try to change things from the inside. And they've ended up being some of my best presidents, some of the hardest workers, some of the people that have gone above and beyond to really make our program special, because instead of just sitting on the sidelines and complaining, they're involved in the process. And sometimes when they get invested in the process and they start seeing it from the inside, they're like, oh, I get it now. Yeah, that's why you do this thing. And so they start seeing it from your perspective as well. And then now you've got a loyal parent. When a parent calls you or comes into your office or maybe even sends you an email, although, treat emails with a big fat grain of salt because anybody can type anything in an email. The face-to-face contact is usually where the most genuine communication occurs. But when somebody comes in your office, treat them as if they might have something that they can teach you, something that you can learn from. And again, you don't have to agree with everything they have to say, but definitely try to listen, take in what they have. Don't just talk over them. Don't get defensive. Stay calm. Just listen. Repeat back to them what they just said. See if they agree with it. And then you can say your piece. Now, before you go into any meeting, and you should really think about this all the time, what is your line in the sand? Or what are your lines in the sand? What are the hills that you're willing to die on? Where will you never compromise? For me, it's my expectations. I'm never going to compromise my expectations no matter what. Nobody's ever going to come into my classroom and say, you know what, you're a little bit too picky about your students' intonation, or you spend a little bit too much time worrying about articulation. Like that, for me, that's not a compromise that I'm willing to make. Hey, I went to music school and everything. I got a fancy stick that I wave in front of the kids. I get to make those calls, and if they don't like it, they can find somebody else. But when it comes to instructional decisions, there are some things that I will not change my mind on. Everything else, however, it's like, are we going to go to Disneyland or are we going to go on a skiing trip this year? Like, who cares, right? So, what are your lines in the sand? And make sure that when you're in a heated discussion with a parent, if they're not crossing one of those lines, what's the big deal? Just stay calm and just listen. When a parent comes in and they just start going off, just let them talk. Just sit there and listen. Just let them talk until they kind of burn themselves out. It's like a kid throwing a temper tantrum, okay? Just let them go. Don't interrupt. Don't say, hey, but what, just let them go. And then once they're done, just take a pause and just say these two words. I understand. Just say those 2 words. And then show them that you understand by repeating some of their points back to them and see if they agree with them. You said that you don't like this. Is that correct? Okay. And you also don't like this. Is that correct? Okay. And then, build from there. We must assume that the parent has an interest in their child and they want what's best for their child. Now, you are responsible for multiple children and their total experience, but the parent is trying to do what they think is best for their child, and you got to treat them like they're being genuine. One time I had a parent that came into my office and shared with me some statistics about students who were sitting closest to the stage. And she counted up the total number of male students and the total number of female students and noted that there was a significant higher amount of male students sitting closer to the stage than female students closer to the stage. And she went on to cite more studies about how it takes longer for a female student to feel more successful in class, and on and on and on. And I agreed with every point that she made, but the assumption that she was making was that student success and student achievement was determined by the proximity to the edge of the stage. And in most orchestras, that's not correct. Now, of course, if you've got a kid with major bowing problems or something, you don't want to put them right there for everybody to see. You kind of hide them in the back. But, usually those front 8 chairs tend to be where, if you do chairs, if you don't do chairs, whatever, those tend to be where the leadership positions tend to reside in most orchestras, and not necessarily like, last desk, last chair, cello, or whatever. That doesn't always end up being your best player. And so sometimes there's just an assumption that a parent has that may or may not meet with reality. And so you might say, hey, maybe this is bad optics because not everybody knows this, and maybe we should mix this around and try to have more equal gendered chairs in the front of the orchestra. And then they say, oh, this guy's listening, he gets it. And what's it really going to, is that really one of your lines in the sand, is like who sits on the edge of the stage? Probably not. So, just mix it up a little bit and, and show some compromise. Some of these parents, they're exceptionally intelligent people, and even though they don't have a lot of experience or knowledge in music, they might be at the top of their fields in some other areas. They might have multiple PhDs and so on, and so they might have a perspective that's very interesting, even though it's not part of the music tradition that we all grew up with. So I like to take everybody's opinion seriously. Before my very first teaching job, my interviews and all this stuff, I met with the HR director of the first school district that I ever taught in, and he sits me down and he knows that I'm just a kid and that I don't know anything and that I think that I probably know a lot of things. And he says, hey, let me give you some advice. And it turned out to be probably some of the best advice I've ever heard. And, this is just sage educator that's been there and done that. And of course, I just came out of music school, so I knew everything already, right? This guy's never been to music school. What does he have to offer me? But, he looks me right in the eyes and he says, the parents here in this town, they send you their very best. And so you have to give them your best. And I never forgot that. Just incredibly powerful statement. The parents are sending you the best that they have, their children. And so it's important for us to do the best that we can for them, because they would absolutely hate for anything bad to happen to their children. They want their children only have good experiences, and we just have to try our very best to make orchestra very positive for them. Last 3 pieces of advice for dealing with angry parents are to, number 1, acknowledge anger and frustration. Okay, just say, hey, I see you're upset. Hey, I see you're angry. I see you're frustrated. How can I help you? Okay. The second thing is that an apology goes a long way. Nobody's perfect. Just say, hey, I'm sorry. Okay. Whether or not it was your fault or whatever, you were in error, whatever, it doesn't really matter. sometimes they just need to hear that apology. Sometimes they just need to hear that empathy. Hey, I'm sorry this happened. I'm sorry that your son or daughter feels this way. I'm sorry that you feel this way. And the third thing is show gratitude. Say, thank you for coming in. Thank you for talking to me face to face. Thank you for being willing to meet with me and talk to me instead of just going directly to my administrator or, sending a nasty email or posting some junk on Facebook or whatever. Thank you for coming and meeting with me. Thank you for sharing your concerns with me. Those 3 things will go a long way with any parent. So again, just stay calm, listen. Sometimes parents just want to be able to vent their frustrations. Sometimes they've got other junk going on in their lives and it kind of comes out in this way. Just listen and really, ask yourself, like, what is your line in the sand? Are there compromises that you're willing to make? Are you at least able to meet them a little bit? So, are you able to learn something from them? So that's my segment on angry parents. In the next one, we're going to be talking about bad contest scores. What happens when you go to a contest and you don't do as well as you would have liked?